Hey, church, good to be here with you as we continue in our series, Our Road to the Resurrection, where we are taking some time in the month of March, just walking to the resurrection that we're going to celebrate together on April 4th. I am doing Luke chapter 10, verses 1 through 16 in our devotional series. And so as we look at this, again, Pastor Tyler started several days ago, he talked about in Luke 9, verse 51, Jesus sets his face to Jerusalem. And so we're kind of in that mode where we're walking together. And Jesus in chapter 10 is going to send out the 72. Now, I want to read a little bit of our text, not all of it for time's sake, but just a little bit of it. It says this in Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, two by two, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. I want to stop there for a second. Now, some translations say 70. My translation, ESV, says 72. But it is a referral or a reference to the 70 Gentile nations that we find in Genesis chapter 10. And so the point here and the idea here is Jesus is sending out disciples, and for us to know, they're unnamed. We don't know who they are. They're anonymous. They're not named here, and we don't ever learn their names in the text. But he's sending out these disciples to proclaim that the kingdom of God has come near, that basically to proclaim the gospel message, which is our role and what we get the privilege of doing as well. And so the idea of it being the 70 or 72 in a reference to the Gentile nations, we know is a reference to the whole world, that this isn't just for a specific people group, but this is for everyone. The gospel is good news for all people. And so as we keep going in our text, it says, and he said to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. And so he's saying to them, as you go, every so often you need to stop and you need to pray and ask God to give you help, to have laborers to go out because the harvest is in front of them. So they're going to take the good news to the world. They're going to invite others to go along with them. And then I love this part as we jump down to verse 4, it says, carry no money bag, no knapsack, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. They're totally dependent. They have nothing with them. They have no protection. They have no money. They're completely dependent upon God to use them as the voice of the gospel into these towns and into these homes, which is exactly what our role is what God has invited us into. What a privilege and a blessing that is. And so they go, and you notice the last part, it says, greet no one on the road. He's like, you don't have time to chit-chat. You have a mission. You are to be on mission, to be intentional, so keep going. And he says, whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him, but if not, it will return to you. And so then he goes on to tell them that if you receive the peace, you stay there. So there are some of these 70 that went, and the first door they knocked on, they didn't leave, because when they got there and they said the blessing of peace, the peace rested upon the house, and they stayed and they enjoyed their time together, and they spent time talking about teaching the good news of Jesus Christ. What a beautiful point for Jesus to remind us of what our role and what he's invited us into in this mission of telling people about the resurrection, about the good news that Jesus has conquered, that he slayed the giants in our life of death and the devil and sin. And all of this is a precursor to show us of our walk, that we're dependent on God. And then if you continue in the passage, he talks of the other things that they would do, that some would heal the sick as they proclaim the kingdom of God has come near. But then he said there'll be some who reject. And there were some who were rejected. And that happens. And for us to know that this happened then as it happens now, but that doesn't stop us from going. He says, just dust off your sandals and go to the next house. And then he says in verse 16, the last part of our text, he says, the one who hears you hears me. And the one who rejects you rejects me, and the one who rejects me rejects him who sent me. These disciples were to be the mouth of God. They were to go into these homes and speak the good news, the proclamation of the gospel. The kingdom of God was near, and that they were speaking on behalf of God. Jesus has given us that role as ambassadors, as missionaries, to tell the world the good news of the gospel, of the resurrection, where we're heading to see this fulfilled. And it's not in my text, but the next passage, 17 through 20, just to point this out real quick, the 72 returned with joy. They came back with, even those that were rejected, they were joy-filled. They came back, and they were so excited about being a part of what God was doing in the world, that God blessed them and privileged them. What a joy it is for us. Even sometimes when people don't respond in a way that we'd want them to respond, we still find joy that God is using us. Imagine the stories that they got to tell of being used by God. Even Jesus rejoices with them. And he says, I give you authority to do all these things, but most importantly, you need to rejoice that your names are written in heaven. You see, we don't rejoice in just the work that he's given us to do. We rejoice in the salvation that he's brought to us. And from there, everything flows. And so we celebrate the resurrection so that we know our lives are written in the book of life, and we get to tell others as we continue this road to the resurrection.